All right, let's get the very latest from the Money Desk here at eNCA with Ropiwe Madzena, who joins us in studio once more. Hi, Ropiwe. So this is so interesting. Transnet needs parts for dozens of locomotives that are currently standing idle. And Public Enterprises Minister Gordhan says he's got a plan.
That's right. The Public Enterprises Minister, Gordhan, will lead a delegation to China in April. This in an effort to address problems between Transnet and the China Railway Rolling Stock Corporation. Transnet and Gordhan's department are hoping the trip will fast-track the delivery of locomotives and spare parts to solve the rail crisis. The Chinese body was implicated in state capture and has since then refused to deliver these materials. This upcoming trip follows a high-level meeting between President Cyril Ramaphosa and Transnet officials. Let's bring in Bonginkosi Mabaso, the Chief Commercial Officer at Transnet Freight Rail. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us this evening, Bonginkosi. Just explain to us what it is that the Minister and Transnet will be discussing with this particular company, given that the contract was cancelled quite a while ago because of some issues that the company had with a SARS as well as a South African Reserve Bank. Maybe just give us an update on that and exactly what it is going to be discussed.
Thank you, Ropiwe, and good evening to you and your viewers. First of all, let me qualify that the contract was not terminated, but rather was suspended in 2019 by the board of Transnet, owing to, of course, what you've alluded to, the findings of the Zondo Commission. With that, what the minister seeks to achieve, of course, the DPE can speak more elaborately around that, is to find common grounds for the CRRC team to support Transnet in relation to returning the parts that we require in order to bring the long-standing locomotives that we have parked across our system back into operation. Now, if I were to get into a bit of detail, this follows extensive work that was done by the Transnet management team in renegotiating with the Chinese a new agreement and rather a revised terms of the agreement, which seeks to capture then addressing some of the concerns that were raised in the initial agreement. Party to that would then be as prominent the actual supply of the required spares and an agreement on support insofar as the maintenance of the locomotives themselves.
For the spares and the locos that are yet to be delivered by CRRC, had Transnet made payment, or would payment come after something is finalised, after the meeting with the minister and related stakeholders?
So with regards to the commercials of the agreement, remember we are now talking to spares and maintenance. Those will be paid for on the basis of supply in relation to what needs to be brought into the country as per the needs of the locomotives that are currently parked. So we are not looking at a transaction where we already have prepaid amounts sitting with the Chinese, but rather a support insofar as what we require now, which will be transacted upon on the basis of supply.
Maybe also just explain then what happens to the tenders that were issued earlier on this year or late last year for other businesses to come on board and offer their services in terms of the parts or whatever it is these locos would need so that they're operational. Do those fall away, or then do they just become a part of a bigger pool of a supply value chain that Transnet would be exposed to?
Perhaps before I respond to that, Ropiwe, let me just provide a bit of a snapshot of the significance of this development to us as Transnet. First of all, you will acknowledge that these locomotives that we are talking about that are supplied by CRRC account for 25% of our overall fleet as Transnet. We have some 450 of these locomotives, which is part of the fleet of 1,900 locomotives that Transnet has. In addition to that, if you look at the state of our locomotives, these being our brand new locomotives, they account for 30% of our overall traction power that we have as an organization to move our trains. Now, with the return of this, if you are looking at potentially getting 150 of them, which is, by the way, what the Chinese are promising in the event that we find each other insofar as this conversation is concerned. 5 of the locomotives, if returned on the coal line, for example, would account for immediately 1,000 trains, trucks rather, off the road, on the road to Richards Bay, which is quite a significant amount. And if you imagine if 5 would pull back 1,000 trucks off the road, imagine 150 locos, what that would do in terms of that impact. Now, to your question, particularly the transaction that we had gone out with to solicit third parties that can re-engineer the required parts. We have not terminated that process on the basis of us not being certain as to what the outcome of this engagement will be. Particularly for that reason, we want to sort of continue with that, but we do acknowledge that the process that we have undertaken is no quick win. We are looking at bringing back locomotives in a space of 2 years at the bare minimum if we go with that route, which is why our entire hopes are pinned on this development progressing to a point where we find each other with CRRC.
Yeah, maybe just as a final thought then, give us a little bit more detail around the speed at which you would be able to get those 1,000 trucks off the road and get those locos moving, the different resources from the different companies. Should CRRC and the department and Transnet come to a deal that benefits everybody, how soon can your big mining companies, your Thungelas, your Exxaros, see efficient movement on the railway?
So again, Rofiwa, this is a very important development for us because instead of the 2 years that I alluded to, within which we can get locomotives back if we get a third party to re-engineer the part, with the CRRC coming on board, you will start seeing these locomotives coming back within a space of 5 months. The agreement that we've negotiated with them would mean an immediate injection of the locomotives, some of which require minimal parts to be brought back into operations, but we cannot access. This overall means for the country now, for the economy of the country, approximately 50 billion rands in foreign earnings that the country is unfortunately unable to realize. And of course, as I've said, 1,000 trucks per week with only 5 locos. If you quantify that to beyond that, you are looking at an absolutely astonishing figure insofar as what we can achieve with the Chinese coming on board.
And of course, the ending of those huge traffic scenes by coal trucks on the N2 in KZN coming to an end as well. 5 months is very encouraging, and I'm wondering. I assume a CEO that's watching this interview this evening is very excited that the cost of logistics and transport might be cut sooner rather than later. Bonginkosi Mabaso, thank you very much for that update. He's the Chief Commercial Officer at Transnet Freight Rail, joining us this evening for that update on the rail network.